Conor McGregor, the mixed martial arts fighter known for near domination in the UFC octagon, is dealing with a new battle, and it is a legal one. A woman in Ireland says McGregor and another man raped her in a penthouse suite years ago, and when criminal charges went nowhere, she took her fight to civil court. Now the litigators are preparing for their final statements. I'm going to sit down with an attorney who has experience in this field to talk about the evidence, the arguments, and what impact this court case could have on Conor McGregor and his career. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. All right, so a lot to talk about when it comes to the Conor McGregor case. And what is the Conor McGregor case? So we have Nikita Hand, who is a 35-year-old hairstylist from Dublin, who says that MMA fighter Conor McGregor sexually assaulted her in a Dublin hotel back in 2018. And over the past 2 weeks, Nikita herself, as well as McGregor, they have taken the stand to tell conflicting stories of what happened that night. While he claims that any sexual contact between the two of them was consensual, she says it was rape. The director of public prosecutions in Ireland actually declined to move forward with a criminal case against McGregor, so she took her case to civil court, seeking an unknown amount of financial compensation for what she says happened to her that day. Now, the jury in this Irish high court room heard 8 days of testimony. Nikita, McGregor's attorneys, they gave their closing arguments on Tuesday. We're going to get to those as well, but a brief synopsis of the story. So Nikita claims that back on December 9th, 2018, after a Christmas party at work, she and a work friend, Danielle Keeley, met up with McGregor and his friend James Lawrence. And by the way, Nikita is suing both McGregor and Lawrence. Now, apparently Nikita and McGregor, they knew each other before. They were in the same kind of social groups. And there was evidence that had been presented that he and her had been messaging each other on Instagram before they actually met up that night. Hey, by the way, thank you again for following our coverage of the Conor McGregor case. And you know what? All of our stories that we cover here on Sidebar. And I'll tell you what, I think from the stories that we cover, it's pretty clear that personal safety is a big issue. And I don't know if you think about it, but you know where you really have to protect yourself? Online. Yeah, I think you would be shocked at how much of your personal information is out there, like your address and your phone number. You ever wonder why you get so many spam calls and emails? That's because this information is all public. But that is where our sponsor, Incogni, comes in. It is a service that helps you take control of your online privacy by removing your personal data from data brokers, huge companies that sell and trade your information without your permission. Incogni found more than 50 plus brokers with my information. But here's the kicker. These data brokers have to remove you from their database if you ask them to. Now, Jesse, you might be thinking, who has time to contact a data broker? Well, that again, my friends, is where Incogni comes in. So they contact those companies for you to get your online safety back. You don't have to do a thing, and then they alert you after the request has been completed. Right now, Incogni has a Black Friday deal where anyone who uses code SIDEBAR at incogni.com/sidebar gets 60% off of an annual plan. Hope you can check it out. Now, Nikita, she did admit to doing cocaine, to drinking, and when she went with McGregor and Lawrence to the Beacon Hotel in Dublin, she claims while they were at that hotel, McGregor choked her 3 times and raped her. James Lawrence also allegedly told police that he had sex with Nikita too, but she says she has no memory of that. Both McGregor and Lawrence insist, though, that any sex was consensual. A lot of moving parts here. I want to bring on attorney and former prosecutor Chris Fusco to talk more about this. Chris, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. Did I get your last name correct, Fusco?
You got it right, Jesse. Fusco.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Great.
Appreciate it.
That's my biggest win of the day. I'm glad I got that.
We're off to a great start.
Okay, good. So a lot to get into with this case. Just generally speaking, have you been following it? What stands out to you about it?
What stands out to me is the wildly different versions of the story. And you touched on it. You have the plaintiff talking about a violent, awful rape that occurred. And you have the defendant, McGregor, saying none of this happened. It was just a party that was with drinking and cocaine, and everybody had a great time. It is a wildly different description of events. And in these cases, Jesse, we're going to have to look at what little facts in this case can turn this case. What little facts can the jury grab onto that will help them make a decision in this case, because It is the classic two very different he said, she said case.
Let's talk about that. I'm going to break it up into sections. So first, let's talk about Nikita Hand's testimony. So she takes the stand and she claims that McGregor came on to her in this penthouse suite of the hotel. She tries to wave him off because she says she knows his romantic partner, Dee Devlin's family. She herself was also in a relationship too. But she says despite that, Conor McGregor pins her down to a bed, presses his body and his body weight right on top of her, strangles her 3 times. She says she thought she was going to die. And she says after that choking, he aggressively pulls her clothes off and sexually assaults her. In fact, photos were shown in court of the outfit that she was wearing that night that appeared to be damage to her underwear and her jumpsuit. And I don't want to get graphic, but it's important to discuss this, unfortunately. She claims, and reportedly so did doctors too, that she was wearing a tampon when this assault happened, and the medical team at the hospital actually had to use forceps to remove it. She claims that when she got home that night, her boyfriend even recorded her talking about what had happened, and in that recording, Nikita is reportedly crying while telling her boyfriend that she had been raped, but she refused to say who the perpetrator was. You know, Chris, this is really tough testimony, but arguably the most important, well, besides McGregor, and we're going to get to that, but what do you make of that?
If the plaintiff is going to win this case, Jesse, it's going to be on some graphic detail. So, with all seriousness on this, does the jury believe Conor McGregor is an MMA fighter? He's a strong man. He certainly is strong enough to do the things that the plaintiff says that he did. Does the jury believe, and there's a lot of testimony about this, that the bruises and the wounds on the plaintiff are what we call defensive wounds? Do they believe that she tried to struggle, say no, tried to ward him off, but he's just too strong? He's just too strong. So if they believe that these are defensive wounds, then that's a very tough situation for the defendant. The testimony about the tampon and where it was positioned is also, again, a fact that can turn the case, because the doctor said he'd never seen anything like that before, and it was very unusual. So if you're trending towards the plaintiff, and we know there's no cameras in the courtroom, so it's hard to tell what the testimony looks like, but if you're starting to believe the plaintiff, you may grab on to these, again, smaller facts in the case. Are there defensive wounds? What is the positioning of evidence in this case? What are the people who are not Conor and not the plaintiff saying? Do they have the ring of truth in this case?
And I'm going to get to the defense's side in a second, but to just amplify what you were saying, there was testimony that she had all this intense bruising on her legs. You mentioned it. There was one paramedic who testified she hadn't seen someone so bruised like that in a long time. There was a doctor that testified that her pain was consistent with internal bruising. And one of the things that I always wonder in these cases, Chris, is does a jury look at this and say, my gosh, there's one thing to just hear her testimony. And again, we don't know exactly what it was like, but we get an understanding of how difficult this might be. But I wonder if a jury takes the fact that if she files this lawsuit, identifying herself, taking the stand, testifying about this, and testifying against a man who is arguably one of the most renowned athletes in the world, you would only do that if this were true. Do you think a jury thinks about that?
Yes, I do, actually. And I think there's a lot of embarrassing testimony for the plaintiff in this case, that she's also telling the jury, look, I may not be proud of everything that happened that night, including the drugs and the alcohol and the partying, but there's a limit. And we all know what it is. There's a limit, and that limit got crossed. But I'm being honest with you, jury, that I will tell you that I did cocaine that night, that I was drinking that night, that, I violated my relationship that night. But I didn't buy this. I wasn't down for this. And I think that also can be very persuasive with the jury.
Now, I'm going to give the other side, but one other thing to mention is that there was a doctor who testified that in May of 2019, he declared Nikita unfit for work because of depression, anxiety, PTSD that might have been caused by what happened with McGregor. But I want to talk a little bit more about the other side. So we have to talk about the CCTV footage at the hotel. It's an important piece of evidence in this case because it purportedly shows McGregor eventually leaving the hotel by himself, and that Nikita had spent time with Mr. Lawrence. And the idea is that she had had sex with him after having sex with McGregor. Now, security video shows the two of them going in and out of a hotel elevator, her and Lawrence, with Nikita at times hugging Lawrence, kissing him on the cheek. Nikita, by the way, apparently cried when the video was played in court, telling her lawyer that it was hard to watch because she didn't remember any of this happening. Then there's other CCTV footage that apparently shows her close to Conor McGregor, maybe even kissing his arm. What do we take away from that footage? Because there's one thing, Chris, to say what each side is saying when they take the stand, but when you look at the footage, and if it is what is being reported, because we haven't seen it ourselves, what do you take away from that?
You take away that the jury's going to have a lot of questions about what happened. Obviously, the plaintiff may say, or it's been their position, that she was just in a flight or fight moment and she wanted to get away from there. She did whatever she could to get away from the situation. The defense is going to take the position, look, everything seems fairly normal here. There's not a lot of distress. There's not a lot of, bruising or things that you see or consistent with that a crime occurred, that you don't see that. It also is problematic for the plaintiff that she doesn't recall sexual encounter with Conor McGregor's friend. And that did not come out of her original recount of the incident. That's a big thing not to remember. I mean, there could be reasons for that, but to me, all of this could be just basically a push, an evidentiary push, which is going to make it very hard on the jury to make a decision here.
Adding to the complications, we heard from Danielle Keeley, who was the woman that was with Nikita that night. She also testified, and she said that she had consensual sex with James Lawrence in one of the rooms of this penthouse. Nikita and McGregor were in the other room, and she said when they came out, quote, everything was fine, and that no one seemed to be upset. She tells the court that she later got an Instagram message from Nikita saying that she had been sexually assaulted, but Keeley told Nikita that she hadn't seen anything like that and told the jurors that she didn't speak with Nikita again after that. So what do you take away from that?
Well, as a judge in Brooklyn used to say a long time ago, everybody involved in this case needs to get themselves a new sweetheart, because none of this is working. And a lot of it is just a lot of questions, because her friend is supporting Conor, again, that right there, right in the moment, there is no crying, there's no evidence of a crime, there's no complaint. Yes, that happens later. And of course, the plaintiff is going to say, well, look, in that moment, I was too scared, I was too frightened. I had to do what I had to do to get out of the hotel. So I put on a good face. I wanted to get out of there. But the bruises tell the story. The tears in the dress tell the story. The fact that the EMT had never seen someone so upset before, as they testified to, that tells the story. So, jury, you're going to have to look at the evidence that is consistent with what the plaintiff's story is if she's going to win in this case.
Talk about telling a story. Let's talk about the other side. So Conor McGregor took the stand, and he admits, just like Nikita admitted, that he consumed alcohol, he used cocaine that night, but he claims there was passionate kissing with Nikita, and it led to what he called, quote, enthusiastic and athletic sex. He says it was consensual. He claims he fell asleep, even was later awoken by Nikita, who propositioned him again, and they had sex again. And he said Nikita wanted to keep the party going, but he ended up leaving the hotel. And he testified that there was, quote, not one iota of distress from the moment he picked her up to the moment that he left her at the hotel. Even under cross-examination, he told Nikita's attorney, your client is full of lies. Everything is a lie. What do you make of his testimony?
See, that's the beauty of being a defendant in some cases. He doesn't have the burden of proof. He doesn't have to prove anything. Now, this is not a criminal case, so we're not talking about proof beyond a reasonable doubt. We're talking about a preponderance of the evidence, so a little more than 50% in the plaintiff's favor. So, of course, you would expect him to say what he said. Again, if we could see him testify, we could get more of a feeling of, did it have the ring of truth to it? I know a couple of witnesses in this case have said they did a little cocaine. I don't believe that. Usually, having been a narcotics prosecutor for a long time, in this situation where you're having Cristal and drinking, there's going to be a lot of cocaine. But yeah, his story is consistent with what the facts could be. Again, to me, the problem for him is the bruising. And I know that there is some testimony that she took a swan dive into a bathtub.
That's what Conor McGregor said. Yeah, that was the way that the
I don't know if that's good enough. Yeah, no. I don't know if that explains everything. But yes, cocaine is an upper, and if there was euphoria, that could be consistent with what he was saying.
I thought it would be more, maybe he said this. I didn't really hear it. Maybe you heard differently. I thought it would have been better for the defense to say, yeah, she's got bruising. It was rough sex, which I'm sure has been something you've heard in the past in these kinds of cases.
Yeah, I think that they needed to do a better job on the bruising. I think that's what we're both saying here, is that
Yeah.
there's a lot of bruising, and there may be some lacerations, and rough sex would have been a better explanation than she was just having an athletic, wonderful time. That might have been more convincing. But look, if the jury believed that he has the ring of truth to his story, that the facts add up, and that there are problems, that there was her friend didn't hear anything, that they're in the same circle of friends, those types of things were occurring, it just may not be enough proof for the plaintiff also.
And it's 2 against 1, right? Because it's not just McGregor testifying saying this didn't happen. It's also Lawrence, because he took the stand. Now, obviously, he's going to say this didn't happen because he's also being sued. But he told the court that Nikita came on to him really hard after McGregor left the hotel, pressured him into going back up to the penthouse to have sex. And he says he didn't see any bruises on Nikita. And he swore that if there were bruises, they didn't come from him. They didn't come from McGregor. And he said that he wouldn't associate with somebody who did something like that to women. You think that's effective?
I think this is when a weird case gets weirder, because the plaintiff's side basically accused Lawrence of being a patsy here. That he's the one who volunteered that he had sex with Nikita. She didn't remember that. He's the one that said that, and he's the one that says, "Well, there's no bruising, but I had sex with her at least twice that night." Is that to get the focus off Conor McGregor? That's what the plaintiff is saying. But to me, this is just a very weird case that a jury's going to have a very difficult time deciding.
And now I go into what I wanted to focus on, talking about the jury, having a tough decision. We go to the closing arguments, which I think, in any case, some of the most important parts of a case, right? It's the last thing the jury hears before they go to deliberate, of course, besides jury instructions. So McGregor's attorney, Remy Farrell, went up first, and he told the jury that it was up to them to look at the facts and evidence, make a decision about whether it was probable that something happened or it didn't, because we're not talking about proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Right. I think in Ireland, it's the balance of the probabilities, probably very similar to what we have, preponderance of the evidence, that it more likely than not happened. Now, Farrell said, if you find for McGregor, that would be devastating for Miss Hand, and if you find for Miss Hand, it would be devastating for Mr. McGregor. There's always a winner and a loser. It's not about who you would like to see win or lose. Judges don't say, who do I like, who do I not like? Those are questions you have to put out of your mind, and that is not easy. Then Farrell suggested to the jury, you might want to highlight the sheer number of lies she tells to her boyfriend, and you might want to consider how persistent those lies are. He also said Mr. Lawrence has been described as a patsy, but yet she is suing him for sexual assault. How can she bring him to court saying you raped me, but then in court say, I don't believe I had sex with him? You might well be scratching your heads about this. It is extraordinary. She is prepared to sue someone for rape in circumstances where she does not think she had sex with them. And then Farrell again reminded the jury that whether they like Conor McGregor or not, it isn't the question. They have to look at the facts. And he wrapped up his closing argument by saying, if he was anyone other than Conor McGregor, would the door of the jury room hit you on the backside before you're out to dismiss this case? Some colorful commentary there. What do you make of that closing?
I like parts of it. I don't like the last part that you just said. In any closing that I'm involved with, you want to make sure the jury understands how important this case is. That this is life or death to Conor McGregor. And it's not about winning or losing. It's about what he is being accused of. What he is being accused of is so terrible, is so awful, that he needs to stand up for his good name, so to speak. That this is the most important moment in the most important case of his life. I like teeing it up like that. The other parts about her being inconsistent and that candidly you can't believe a thing she says. Of course you want to say that. That she's mistaken. That she just how can you rely on somebody's memory? And that's what we're talking about. How can a reasonable juror, rely on somebody's memory and recollection that has all the inconsistencies that Ms. Hand has, plus adding in alcohol and cocaine? How can you possibly rely on that? And you got to hammer that and hammer that and hammer that to the jury.
Now let's move on to another closing argument. They took a break, but then we heard from James Lawrence's attorney, John Fitzgerald. He addressed the jury, and he says it makes no sense that Lawrence would want to insert himself into this case if he had done something wrong. One thing everyone agrees is there was a media storm about a sports star allegedly raping a woman in a Dublin hotel. And would someone make up a story to put themselves into that story, which would lead to a criminal charge? Who would do that? Who would make up a story to put themselves in that frame? Fitzgerald also pointed out that Lawrence's involvement in the case is just bizarre in another way, because Nikita is accusing him of rape, but denies having had sex with him, saying she can't recall any sexual contact between them. And Lawrence's attorney also reminded the jury of at least 4 instances seen on that CCTV footage where Nikita initiates physical contact with Lawrence. As I'm listening to this, Chris, I don't know, I think he's making some good points, and it makes me wonder, A, if the jury believes that, does that help Conor McGregor's case? B, could it be maybe Lawrence is not found liable, but Conor McGregor is? I don't know. Or maybe they feel that she was attacked by both of them. I think there's some good points about that, because remember, the allegation, it was reported that he admitted to having sex with her. Why say that?
Well, I guess I'll take the other side, because I agree with you, Jesse. Why did he do the things he did? Is it because of what the defense just said, as you summarized, or is it the truth that he is the patsy? He is the ringleader of the party. It is his job to protect Conor McGregor no matter what. Conor McGregor is his meal ticket. So if this is just about money in this case, because that is, nobody's going to jail, right? So this is just about money. And as we just saw with Mike Tyson and Paul, they can make as much money, as they want, even as time goes by.
That's a whole other debate if that was worth it. We can talk about that another day. Yeah.
But if this is just about money and he can protect Conor McGregor, maybe that's why he's doing it on the plaintiff side. But I listen. The defense summary makes sense on that. But the jury needs to answer the question: why would he do this? Why would he admit to having sex with her if she doesn't remember it? And I think that cuts both ways also.
Well, we have to talk about the final closing argument, and this happened after lunch. By the way, you like that I'm laying this out. There's a break, there was lunch. I mean, we don't have cameras, so I'm trying to do my best here. But this happened. So this was Nikita's attorney, John Gordon, and he says that McGregor and Lawrence's stories relied heavily on that CCTV footage of Nikita with the men. But he says that video neither proves nor disproves what she says happened in that hotel room. And he also pointed out that all of the medical testimony supported Nikita's claim of some kind of attack. Gordon said Dr. Ann Leader, one of the country's most prominent psychiatrists involved in over 5,000 cases, said that Miss Hand had PTSD. And what causes that? A violent assault that has not been challenged. The defendants did not call a psychiatrist, and they could have. I suggest the reason they did not is they knew any of these professional people would agree with the plaintiff's professional witness. There was uncontroverted evidence that my client suffered a violent incident. And Gordon also claimed that Lawrence and McGregor, they were in cahoots. Lawrence's legal fees are being paid by McGregor. That was the assertion. And Gordon suggests that Lawrence went to the police, gave his version of events at McGregor's instruction to throw doubt on what Nikita had to say. Now, McGregor and Lawrence, they have denied that. And during his argument, in reference to McGregor, Gordon said, what he should have done, if he was a man at all, is apologize to my client for what he did. But he is not a man. He is a coward, a devious coward, and you should treat him for what he is. First of all, Chris, is that language allowed in a courtroom in America? Can you call a defendant a coward? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But what do you make of those final push to say, jury, believe my client?
Again, it makes sense. The part I like the most is, where is their medical proof about the PTSD? Because where is their witness? Because paying legal bills, and that's not going to shock anybody. But Conor McGregor certainly has the resources to have her examined for PTSD and put a psychiatrist on the stand that says she doesn't have it, and they chose not to do that. That to me is effective. I would be really careful if I was plaintiff's counsel glossing over the closed caption TV evidence, because that's a problem for them. And I think that they really need to explain to the jury what her thought process was at that time, that she was just trying to get out of the building, that she was just trying to get home and be safe again. And that's what they're seeing. I think he needed to really explain it and not just gloss over that, because if you're a juror, you can get stuck on something like that. So, yeah, I think the points are there. I would just be careful about name calling in general. I don't like it. I don't think that calling him a coward, whether you can get away with it, helps your case here. You're alleging a violent rape. Here, stick to the facts.
But, the counter argument to that would be these allegations are so horrendous that
Right.
it becomes emotional about who you're talking about. And by the way, just so everybody understands, I'm going to get a little bit more into what Gordon had to say. According to Gordon, there are 4 categories of damages for this jury to consider if they believe that McGregor and or Lawrence are at fault. There's general damages, compensation for pain, suffering, consequences of the event, special damages like medical expenses, loss of earnings, aggravated damages, which are specifically referring to the conduct of the defendant. Exemplary damages, this is a way for the judge to express disapproval of the defendant's actions in a public forum. And in conclusion, Gordon said all of that is subject to you deciding that McGregor did what we say he did. The evidence is overwhelming. It's embarrassing, but overwhelming. And when he got into the witness box, he decided to reinvent his own defense and put a case he had never made before because he was nervous the case he had made would fail. It underlines that from the beginning this case was unsound, and you should now vindicate and compensate my client. You can figure out the fact from the fiction. That is your job, and I have no doubt you can do it. Chris, final thoughts on those arguments and the damages in this case?
Well, look, I mean, if they find that the plaintiff is correct and the facts are alleged, the damages are going to be, I guess I have to use their millions of pounds or euros are going to be awarded here, because it can certainly be a punitive case. And I think that's what they're talking about with aggravating and exemplary damage. Not only could she get compensated for what happened, but there can basically be an adding on of damages because your conduct is so reprehensible that an example has to be made. So yes, I think that could be on the table if she prepared, if the jury finds for her. I don't like he changed his story, because his story could make sense. I mean, his story is consistent with the facts in this case. It's just his version. So, I like what he summed up and what he said at the end. And the damages could, if it goes her way, will be considerable.
Let's see what the decision is. We'll keep a careful eye on it. Chris Fusco, thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed the conversation with you.
Thanks, Jesse. Anytime.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.